Amid the debates over a nuclear renaissance here in the U.S. and also nuclear storage in our country, today the Senate Energy Committee discussed a somewhat less controversial topic, that is small-scale nuclear energy. There are two bills before the committee right now, both connected to the deployment of small-scale reactors. Those are ones we're talking about that are less than 300 megawatts overall. And both of these bills now have the support of the top two members of the Energy Committee. Clean Sky's Dan Goldstein was at today's hearing. And Dan, we're talking about yet another acronym here. They're omnipresent here in Washington. In this case, something called an SMR.
Right, Tyler, and exactly. Smaller in this case could indeed be better, and that was the message today before the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. And SMRs, as you said, are small modular reactors, 300 megawatts or less. That's about 4 times the size, or I should say 4 times as small as some of the conventional reactors that we've been seeing lately. Now, here's some advantages of why these could be very useful. They are easy to build, or at least I should say easier to build than the current reactors that are in process of being licensed. One of the great things about these, at least we were told, is that you could gang them together like locomotive engines on a train. Now, for history buffs, you might recall that the Sherman tank, which won World War II for the United States Army, the early versions of that tank had 5 Chrysler engines ganged together. So this is kind of a similar version of that for the nuclear world, and certainly the United States military has a lot of experience with smaller reactors, especially the United States Navy. They use modular reactors, of course, in their aircraft carriers and submarines. And the bottom line, Tyler, is basically using a modular design could lower the cost significantly. It's up as much as $14 billion to produce one nuclear plant. The construction, obviously, costs would come down if you can make that size of the reactor smaller. And under Waxman-Markey, as we've been talking about, as many as 100 new nuclear plants could be built to take up the slack for some of those coal-fired power plants. Bottom line is it could mean a lot cheaper electricity too. We heard today from Senator Lisa Murkowski, who's the ranking member of the Senate Energy Committee, and she's all for this because she believes that these modular reactors could replace some power plants, some diesel-powered plants, diesel generators in some remote areas of Alaska where, believe it or not, they pay 60 cents per kilowatt hour, 5 times the national average for electricity. So there could be some smaller reactors coming to the fore very soon, Tyler.
Dan, let's be direct about this. Virtually any conversation about nuclear energy on Capitol Hill eventually comes back to the issue of Yucca Mountain, and certainly that was once again the case today, right?
That's right, and certainly Yucca Mountain was the 2 words that were not to be named, certainly at this hearing, and people talked about a central storage facility instead. And that's one of the things that they talked about, how these modular reactors could actually help reduce the amount of nuclear fuel that has to be reprocessed and put elsewhere. Because here's what. You can go 10 to 20 years without changing the fuel on one of these modular reactors, and there's several designs out there. And it's kind of like basically taking the engine out of your car and sending it back to the factory to change the oil. Now, of course, that doesn't make a lot of sense if you're doing it every 2,500 miles like you and I do on our cars, but with these reactors, you might not have to do it for 10 to 20 years, and that certainly would cut down on the amount of nuclear waste that has to be reprocessed and stored elsewhere.
Yeah, a clear appeal for that, Dan. What about the 2 bills we mentioned earlier? I know there's a bipartisan support for one, if not both bills, including committee leadership there, Chairman Jeff Bingaman, also the ranking member you mentioned, Lisa Murkowski. I'd imagine that bodes pretty well for the chances of these bills to get through the Energy Committee.
That's right, Tyler, and expect for these to move quickly. We've been told that they will probably have a markup as early as tomorrow. One of them is S-2052. That's the Nuclear Energy Research Initiative and Improvement Act. That is sponsored by Chairman Jeff Bingaman and also by Senator Mark Udall of Colorado. Both are Democrats. There's another one, too, that also has bipartisan support, and that's the Nuclear Power 2021 Act. That is sponsored by Senator Bingaman and also Ranking Member Senator Lisa Murkowski, and that directs the DOE to research or fund and research construction on 2 of these modular designs. And bottom line, what my Senate sources are telling me is that these 2 bills certainly could be included in what will be probably the final piece of the Senate climate framework that we talked about last week. That, of course, was introduced and certainly talked about by John Kerry of Massachusetts, Joe Lieberman of Connecticut, and Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. So expect to see something, certainly in the nuclear portion, being strengthened. These two bills certainly could be part of it. Tyler?
Maybe a bit of a nuclear end run there. Dan Goldstein, thank you very much.